The concept of the deep state refers to an alleged covert network of powerful individuals or institutions within a government that operates outside the public view and influences decision-making behind the scenes, often in opposition to the democratic process. While the term deep state has its roots in political conspiracy theories, it has gained prominence in contemporary political discourse, especially within the United States. The term is often used by critics of government bureaucracy, intelligence agencies, and other institutions to suggest that a hidden and undemocratic faction is working to undermine elected leaders or manipulate the political system for its own benefit. Origins and evolution of the deep state concept. The notion of a deep state has ancient and modern roots, but the term itself has its origins in Turkey. In the 1990s, Turkish journalists and politicians used the phrase derin devlet to describe a clandestine network of military officials, intelligence officers, and politicians who allegedly controlled key elements of the state behind the scenes. This shadowy group was said to operate outside of the formal political system, often engaging in illegal activities like smuggling, assassination, or political manipulation to maintain its power and control. The deep state in Turkey was believed to act in its own interests, and at times, against the will of the civilian government or democratic institutions. The concept of the deep state gained more widespread attention globally after 9/11 and the rise of American conspiracy theories. In the US, the term has been adopted by political figures and activists who allege that an unelected group of bureaucrats, intelligence agencies, the military-industrial complex, and other entrenched elites pull the strings of government policy, regardless of who is elected into office. The deep state is typically portrayed as working against the interests of the general populace, manipulating public opinion, and maintaining the status quo for its own benefit. Theories and allegations surrounding the deep state. Proponents of the deep state conspiracy theory argue that there exists a secretive and unelected faction within the government that influences, and often controls, the direction of policy in ways that are not transparent or accountable to voters. These theories suggest that this group of insiders has far-reaching power, often extending beyond any one political administration. Various institutions and individuals are often linked to the deep state, including intelligence agencies like the CIA and NSA, military contractors, international banks, and powerful business interests. One of the most common allegations is that the deep state undermines presidents or political leaders who challenge its interests. For example, many supporters of the theory contend that U.S. presidents like John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon, and Donald Trump faced covert opposition from intelligence agencies or bureaucratic elites because they threatened the established order. Kennedy's assassination is often cited as an example of deep state intervention, with conspiracy theorists suggesting that elements within the CIA, the military, and other government agencies were involved in orchestrating his murder due to his foreign policy stance, especially his position on Cuba and the Soviet Union. In the case of Nixon, some believe that the Watergate scandal was part of an effort by the deep state to remove a president who was seen as a threat to the established political system. Nixon's decision to open relations with China and his opposition to the Vietnam War made him a target of entrenched power factions. Some claim that Nixon's resignation was not a result of public outcry, but rather a carefully orchestrated campaign by these hidden forces to restore the status quo. The most recent and prominent example in the US of the deep state conspiracy theory was the presidency of Donald Trump. During his time in office, Trump repeatedly accused members of the so-called deep state of sabotaging his administration. His allegations focused on the FBI, the CIA, and various members of the intelligence community who were allegedly involved in efforts to undermine his presidency, including the investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Trump's supporters claimed that these agencies sought to prevent his political agenda from succeeding, viewing them as part of a larger cabal that seeks to maintain globalist, neoliberal policies at the expense of the American people. The deep state and its critics. Critics of the deep state theory argue that it is often a paranoid or oversimplified explanation for the complex dynamics of power within a modern state. They argue that the conspiracy theory is a way to scapegoat unelected officials and institutions when political leaders face challenges in implementing their agenda. Instead of seeing the complexities of governance and the bureaucratic process, proponents of the theory tend to focus on shadowy groups that can be blamed for thwarting the will of the people. From a more rational standpoint, many argue that the deep state is merely a byproduct of modern governmental structures. Complex state bureaucracies are often seen as resistant to change because they are built on institutional inertia, existing norms, and long-standing alliances between different sectors, including business, the military, and government. In this view, the perceived interference of the deep state is not a deliberate conspiracy, but rather the natural tendency of a large and entrenched bureaucracy to maintain the status quo, even in the face of changing political leadership. Some critics of the theory point out that accusations of a deep state often ignore the significant power of elected officials. U.S. presidents, for instance, wield significant power over the direction of government policy, including control over military spending, foreign diplomacy, and executive orders. While it is true that bureaucratic agencies have significant influence in certain areas, these agencies are still ultimately accountable to elected leaders, who have the power to appoint and remove senior officials. The role of the media and public perception. Media and public perception play a critical role in perpetuating the idea of the deep state. In the digital age, conspiracy theories can spread quickly through social media, alternative news sites, and online forums. People who feel alienated by mainstream politics may find solace in the idea that a secretive group is controlling events behind the scenes. Additionally, certain media outlets have amplified the rhetoric around the deep state, framing it as a nefarious force at odds with democracy. This has created a feedback loop where the more these conspiracies are discussed, the more they become ingrained in popular discourse. As a result, the notion of the deep state often becomes a convenient narrative for those who seek to explain political frustrations, electoral losses, or shifts in policy that they view as counter to their interests. Conclusion. The deep state conspiracy theory taps into deep-seated fears about the lack of transparency, accountability, and corruption within modern government systems. While there is little to no concrete evidence supporting the existence of a centralized, coordinated deep state acting in opposition to elected leaders, the idea of shadowy elites controlling the political process continues to resonate with many people. Whether viewed as a valid critique of government overreach or as a dangerous myth, the theory reflects broader anxieties about the concentration of power in the hands of unelected officials and the complexities of modern governance.